It's probably the quintessential example of what happens when somebody doesn't believe in the mission that is aligned and how things can go wrong. Anybody know what this picture is of? I'll give you a hint. This is Jesus. The way Judas sold out Jesus and for the Romans to identify him so they could take him in was by walking in a crowd and giving him a kiss. So that's how he ended up identifying and betraying Jesus. And Jesus already had predicted that this would happen earlier on and predicted that one of his disciples wouldn't believe in him. So this is about belief. If you don't believe, your people won't believe. If your people won't believe, it doesn't matter what you tell them to do, the mission's not going to get carried out in the same way. A lot of times, one of the things that stands in contrast to extreme ownership is our own ego. When I'm talking about ego, I'm talking about not just about our belief in ourselves. You are all extremely successful people and do really, really great work. Believing in yourself is different. All of a sudden taking it personally when things don't work. How many of you have ever dealt with a team member, let's say somebody under you even, but a team member, it could be made a mistake, but you just had a disagreement with them and it ended up becoming a personal thing. Has anybody ever dealt with that, where you ended up with a personal conflict around? Typically when things become personal, it's all about ego, and we have to get back to the mission that we're doing. Sometimes when people think that their ego is more important than anything else, what they are, now we can see the fallout for WeWork. Ego clouds our judgment. When we start taking things personally, we really fall back on biases. When ego gets involved, it's more about protecting our version of the answer than it is about getting the right answer. A lot of times in teams, and you don't have to get big teams for this, but a lot of times in teams, there can be some personal agendas. People are trying to protect their part of the work. We'll talk next week about cover and move. And this can happen in cross-sectional teams a lot. Anytime you find conflict between teams, even teams working in the same company, within the same company. When it comes to admitting mistake and taking ownership, right, we're talking about extreme ownership around mistakes and developing plans to overcome challenges, ego is one of our biggest detractors. Because admitting mistakes, if you let your ego get in the way, becomes about your own personal value. It becomes about you, not about the mission, not about the task. So that can be a really, really big problem. And I can almost guarantee that when you look at this at a base level, somebody early on made some decision, a relatively small decision potentially, about adjusting emission reporting from internal computers on this thing that then stacked up and stacked up and stacked up, and nobody was willing to at some point say, hey, forget our own personal stake in this. At the top leadership level, ego can really prevent any one of us in a leadership position from looking at our performance. If we make performance a personal thing, it can end up hampering the entire team's performance. So 𝗬liche has been interviewed God knows how many times by now about what happened with Steve Jobs. It was a little crazy to take the founder, kick him out, and then obviously Steve had to come back. I think it was like 12 years after he was outed. Steve came back to save Apple. And 𝗬liche says this, that at the time when this was going on, he didn't have the business expertise to understand Steve's visionary leadership. He asked this question out loud in the interview once. He said, what if we didn't have that showdown? The showdown was just about pricing. It was about pricing of a specific model, the first Mac. He didn't have an understanding of what sometimes it takes to push beyond the boundaries of what the industry currently accepted. And essentially what Steve Jobs was telling him at the time is, we are trying to make people think differently about computers. We've overpriced this. If we lower the price, we'll sell more of them. Maybe we'll take a loss. Maybe we'll end up barely making it on this product line, and maybe it'll put us under pressure, but it'll change the industry and the expectations of the customer. He didn't see it. He pushed him out. And this is now decades later saying, man, I wish we never had that showdown. And that's 𝗬liche. He couldn't do it in the moment. In the moment, he had to win the fight. And so he went to the board, and the board ended up outing Steve. But this is 𝗬liche saying years later, I probably should have never had that showdown. But in your career, where have either one of these, trying to serve a mission that you didn't believe in, trying to go after something that you didn't really fully buy into, or having your ego involved in performance, where have those interfered with leadership for you?